Now, President Macron's announcements mean that some businesses will be able to reopen from next month. That will help to restart the economy, which the government now says will shrink by 8% this year. For more, I'm joined by our business editor, Stephen Carroll. Stephen, good news then for some businesses in that speech, but the overall picture for the French economy remains grim.
These new predictions are worse than the last set we'd gotten from the government. Before, they'd been saying it was a 6% contraction in the economy. Now they're saying it'll be 8% in 2020. And the longer those confinement measures go on, the worse that figure is going to get. The budget deficit, too, is increasing sharply with all of the extra public spending. The budget minister is saying that's now going to be around 9% this year, and France's debt to GDP ratio is going to go up as well. The government's spending around 100 billion euros trying to support the economy through this crisis. That's measures like loans to small businesses and the temporary unemployment insurance scheme as well, on which there are now 8 million French workers availing of those payments. Now, in Emmanuel Macron's speech, he said that some businesses and shops would be able to reopen after May 11th. And his words were that as many people as possible should be able to get back to work at that stage. And that is part of the effort to limit the economic impact over the long term of the virus on the French economy. That move has been welcomed by the French Business Federation, MEDEF, which says it gives businesses time to prepare to reopen in a way that's going to be able to protect workers as well. One sector that won't see any change, though, are hotels, restaurants, bars and cafes. They're going to remain closed until further notice. The government is going to announce a new scheme of economic support for that industry. Very important, as it's the 6th biggest employer in France. Almost 1 million people work in that sector, and there are 300,000 people hired every summer to cover the summer season.
Stephen, in last night's address to the nation, the president also called for a cancellation of debt for African countries, and he's not the only one.
There have been calls coming from many quarters along these lines. The IMF and the World Bank says there should be efforts made for debt relief. We know that there's been calls from NGOs as well for all debt payments this year to be cancelled. Now, Emmanuel Macron says that there'll have to be a massive cancellation of debt for African countries. That's to allow them to better channel their resources into fighting the virus. That's not something France is going to be able to do by itself. It's only a relatively minor creditor for a lot of these countries. It's estimated that across Africa, public debt totals over $360 billion. So it's a huge amount of money, of which only a very small amount is owed to the French government. There has been some progress on interim measures ahead of the IMF and World Bank spring meetings, which are taking place by video conference this week. The IMF saying that debt payments worth around $200 million are going to be covered by its catastrophe trust for 25 countries. That includes the likes of Afghanistan, Yemen, Chad, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. A small effort for interim measures for debt payments, but what Emmanuel Macron is looking for is something that would be much more permanent to relieve the burden on African countries.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Stephen Carroll joining us there.